to this bi-weekly sutra discussion. And I also would like to welcome all our lay devotees here on Zoom platform, also on Facebook and YouTube Live. So let us begin our session by paying respect and homage to the Buddha by reciting Namo Tassa 3 times together. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. I pay my respect and homage to him, the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened Buddha. Dear friends in Dhamma, before we go into the discussion of today's topic, I would like to introduce our venerable monks and nuns who are here to discuss today's topic on the way of contentment and true inheritance of the spiritual path, based on a sutra, which is the Dhammadaya, the Sutta. So to discuss today's sutra, we have Venerable Bhante Suddhaso from New York City, USA. And then we have Venerable Tridao from Florida, USA. Then we have Venerable Bhante Pesala joining the discussion from all the way from Sri Lanka. Then we have Venerable Sumedha, who is joining the discussion from Ottawa, Canada. And then we have Venerable Professor Bhamunagama Shantivimala, who is joining the discussion from Toronto. And I'm very happy to tell all of you, Professor Bhamunagama Shantivimala was one of my teachers. I'm very, very happy to have his presence on today's discussion. So I would like to give a warm welcome with much respect and devotion. And then we have Venerable Kalubovila Ananda Thero joining the discussion from Cambridge, Ontario, Canada. Then we have Venerable Bhante Kusala joining from here, Toronto, Mississauga, from our temple. And then we have Venerable Nanda Thero joining the discussion from Rhode Island, USA. Sorry, Bhante? Yeah.
Long Island.
Yeah, and then we also have Venerable Bhante Jinananda. He has his camera off. He will come soon. So I would like to welcome all of you with a lot of respect because I personally appreciate your service to the society, to the world. Because of you, the world is becoming a better place. And also, we are having Venerable Bhante Sudaso after a long time. She was doing Tudong practice in Italy. Bhante Kusala was there with him together with two nuns from Italy and England. So last week, Bhante Kusala gave a Dhamma talk on Tudong practice, which was greatly appreciated by our students. So, and also I would like to welcome our friends, Dhamma friends who have joined our Zoom platform, and also who are watching this discussion on Facebook and YouTube Live. So before we go into the discussion, I would like to kindly encourage our friends to share this program in the social media timelines, in Facebook or whatever social media timeline you use, for the people, your friends and colleagues, please feel free to share this program. You never know, someone might benefit from today's discussion. So by sharing, you're giving the gift of Dhamma for the spiritual and psychological benefit. So today's topic is the way of contentment and true inheritance of the spiritual path, based on the Dhammadaya, the sutta on the Majjhima Nikaya, and Venerable Bhante Suddhasa actually translated this sutta from Pali into English. So I would like to begin the discussion with him. Bhante Suddhasa, please guide us through this sutra. Maybe you can give a summary and highlight the key points, and then we can get into discussion. Okay? Bhante.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you, Bhante Saranapala, for choosing the sutta and inviting me to open the discussion. So this is a relatively short discourse from the Majjhima Nikaya that has two distinct portions to it. So the first part of the sutta is given by the Buddha, and the second part is given by Venerable Sariputta. And these are somewhat related, but it's good to take them separately. So the first portion, the Buddha starts with this statement. He says to the monks, he says, become the heirs of my Dhamma, not the heirs of my possessions. So in Pali, this is Dhamma dayada me bhavata ma amisadayada. So the heir or recipient. So the Buddha is saying to be the heirs to the Dhamma, to the teachings that he gave, instead of just fixating on the material things that we can get by being associated with the Buddha or being associated with the Dhamma. And this is particularly relevant in monastic life. So in many suttas, the Buddha talks about one should become a monk out of a sincere devotion to practicing Dhamma Vinaya. Not just for the sake of a livelihood. So similarly here, he's making the statement that we should try to inherit the Dhamma rather than inheriting the material wealth of the Buddha. And of course, the Buddha, being a Buddhist monk himself, he didn't have much in the way of material wealth or possessions, but he gives one example. So he gives the example of a time when he had finished eating, but he still had some leftover food. And then two monks came who hadn't had enough to eat. And the Buddha told them, you can have this leftover food if you like. And he tells them, I've had enough to eat, but there's some extra food here which you can eat it. And if you don't eat it, then it will just be thrown away. And then these two monks think to themselves, they're like, okay, so the Buddha's offered us this food, but the Buddha also told us to be the heirs of Dhamma, not the heirs of his possessions, not the heirs of his material things. So one of the monks thinks, well, then I shouldn't receive this food because then I would be the heir of the Buddha's material wealth. And the other monk thinks, well, what's the harm in this? I'll just go ahead and take it and eat it. And then the Buddha says that of these two monks, the one who's more praiseworthy is the one who turns down the food. And this is a story which the first time I read the sutta, I found very puzzling. This didn't make any sense to me at all. The first time I read the sutta many years ago, because it seems so impractical. Like the food's going to get thrown away anyway. The monks are hungry. There's food. Like, what's the problem? Like, why is the Buddha pointing out that it's more praiseworthy in this situation to turn down the food? But the Buddha actually explains why. He says that if we are the heirs of his possessions, then people will think that that's why people follow the Buddha, that they follow the Buddha just to have access to all the nice things that tend to gather around the Buddha. And actually similar things can happen these days. Like someone goes to stay at a monastery, not because it's a good place to learn the Dhamma or practice the Dhamma, but just because it's a wealthy and well-supported monastery. Or they go to follow a particular teacher, not necessarily because they want to learn from that teacher, but because that teacher always gets donated lots of nice things, which he shares with his students. So then very easily it's this thing of like, well, what's going on here? Why are these people into Buddhism? Why are they monastics in the first place? Are they actually doing it with a sincere motivation? Or is it just for the sake of material gain? So again, in the case of these two monks, it's not necessarily that the monk who took the food was a bad monk, but rather that the Buddha is pointing out how this creates a harmful impression in the mind of lay people. How then lay people can start to get a bad opinion about the monks. They can start to think that maybe these monks are practicing for the wrong reasons. And then also looking at our own mind, looking at how we can easily be motivated by a desire for gain, a desire for praise, a desire for getting things from others. And when we're motivated by the desire for gain, then the way that we present the Dhamma can become altered. So we might start saying what people want to hear rather than saying what the Buddha taught. Or we might start acting the way people like to see us act rather than acting the way the Buddha would want us to act. So here I think it's really important to always be reflecting on this urge to always be the heirs of the Dhamma, even when it seems impractical, even when it seems like, oh, it'd be so much easier just to go with what's easy and what's comfortable. Instead, we always need to be considering how can we really genuinely take the inheritance of the Buddha as the most important thing. So the inheritance of the Buddha's teachings as being the most important thing that we've inherited from the Buddha. Then at this point, so then the Buddha goes into his own dwelling, and Venerable Sariputta then gives a Dhamma talk to the monks. The topic that the Venerable Sariputta talks about is slightly different. So he's talking about practicing in accordance with seclusion. This word seclusion, so in Pali is viveka, which means to be separated from something. And this is also the same word that we see when the Buddha is talking about jhanas. So he starts by talking about how in order to enter into deep concentration, one needs to be secluded from sensuality and secluded from all unwholesome states of mind. So in the same way then, when we're talking about seclusion, it's good to keep in mind that seclusion is not just physical seclusion in the sense of being alone or being in a quiet, peaceful monastery, but also it's the internal seclusion of the heart in the sense of keeping our own mind separated from defilements, keeping our own mind at a distance from the distractions and entanglements of the outside world. So always trying to keep an internal sense of security and separation from any kind of corrupting influence. So Sariputta then, Venerable Sariputta then gives a brief summary of Buddhist practice. So he talks about people who are opulent, so fixated on luxury and comfort and pleasure all the time. And again, this is a reference to being an era of physical things rather than the luxury. So Sariputta then is making this connection to what the Buddha was just talking about. He's saying people who don't discard the unwholesome mind states that the Buddha says to discard, and they're fixated on opulence, on luxury, on having nice things all the time. They're lazy, they're not interested in cultivating the practice. And then he says these sorts of people are worthy of being criticized. And interestingly enough, Sariputta also says the same statement whether the monks are senior, whether they're middling rank Majjhima monks, or whether they're junior. So regardless of someone's seniority, we still use the same system of evaluation. And then finally, he gives a brief list of some examples of states of mind which we should make an effort to relinquish, which we should make an effort to overcome. He lists greed, anger, denigration, malice, envy, stinginess, fraudulence, deceitfulness, stubbornness, hostility, conceit, arrogance, pride, and negligence as all being qualities of mind which we are to try to remove from the mind through practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. So there's a brief summary of this sutta, and at this time I would love to hear what the other venerables have to say about this discourse so we can all understand it more deeply. Thank you.
You have to unmute, Venerable Saranapala. You have to unmute.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Bhante Sudaso, for giving us the summary of this brief summary of this sutra. I know this sutra is of immense benefit to all of us, the monastics, monks and nuns, and also the lay people. So before, of course, this is an open discussion. I would like to kindly ask our venerable monks and nuns to raise your hand if you would like to share your thoughts regarding today's sutta and the topic. And before we go to next monk, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Venerable Simbalave Anandasagar Theoro joining from Long Island Buddhist Temple, where Bhante Nanda Kottave Nanda also is there. He's the abbot. And thank you, Bhante Anandasagar, for joining the discussion. And also now we have Bhante Dinananda. We can see him now. He's joining the discussion from the Bangladesh Buddhist Vihar, Toronto. And so we have two hands raised. Bhante Anand, they're from Cambridge, Canada. What are your thoughts on today's discussion, sutta?
Thank you, Venerables. I think when Bhante Sudaso explained it, it was beautifully put. The entire thing was beautifully put, because when I first read the Dhammadaya Sutra, because if you look at the place where Dhammadaya Sutra is stacked at, it's right after the Mulapariyaya Sutra and Sambhasa Sutra, so which are very profound and very deep teachings, and right next to that you find Dhammadaya Sutra. So my first thought was the exact thought that Bhante Sudaso mentioned, that I was thinking it doesn't make any sense. Like, if the food is going to be anyway thrown out to a place, why can't the second monk consume it, or why can't the two monks consume it? And because they are hungry too. But then, like Bhante said, I think it gives a fantastic message, a very strong message, because we sometimes get into a certain thing because of the motive of wanting to have things, basically the greed. And again, to add, Bhante Sudaso beautifully put that, but to add on to that, I think looking at the motive of a person is very important, because you could do the same thing but have two different motives. For example, a person who's going to kill someone with a knife is doing it with hatred, but a doctor who's going to cut open someone is doing it with compassion, because he wants to save lives. So figuring out the motive of why you are doing what you are doing is very hard, and it's usually very hard for others to guess. And the second thing is, when we sort of try to look at the opulence or the luxuriousness of something, again, it becomes very hard to say, because relating to something which occurred to me, I was one day carrying a bag which was very expensive before I became a monk, and it was a I can't remember the Tumi bag. It was presented to me, a Tumi very expensive bag, and then I was traveling with that, and then I lost it. So I went to the lost and found counter, and there was another person. So he was very upset about it. And I was upset because the Tumi bag had certain important documents, not because it was very expensive. But the other person, I saw that he just had a normal bag, a leather bag, but he loved it so much. So he was very upset. In fact, he was more upset than me. So when we try to measure things, it's not necessarily the opulence is not necessarily in the physical object per se, but how we perceive it, whether it's opulent or not. So again, someone could be traveling in a private jet or a BMW or a Mercedes, the latest version, and someone could be traveling on his own little scooter. How much you are attached to that, only you would know. It's not on the physical object, but only you would know internally. But then Buddhism also gives this fantastic tool of pratyaveksha. Whenever we try to consume things, be it food, be it clothes, we do a pratyaveksha. And related to the normal days, it's no different to a calorie counter. When you have installed these calorie counters to lose your weight, before you eat, you think, do I really need this amount of calories for my daily consumption? So pratyaveksha is a beautiful thing, and it again gives that check. What's the motive behind it? Is it are you doing it because of a basic physical need, or are you doing something on top of a basic physical need like desire or greed? And then the second part of it, I think it's again very interesting because the restful, what Bhante said about seclusion and restfulness. When we become monks, I think it's sometimes a challenge for monastics. Are we really finding the seclusive restfulness in our temples, in our setup? Because again, relating back to my life, I remember that when I was working in the corporate sector, you are given the mandatory leave of 14 days, 21 days, etc. And then later on, when I became an entrepreneur, I had my people, so I had more free time. But when you become a monk, sometimes, especially, I'm not telling saying about all the temples, but some temples you have to work 365, 24/7, ready to night until the last person walks out. So in some ways, again, when we say restfulness, kaya viveka, chitta viveka, and upadi viveka, the most important thing is how restful we are internally. But I find that sometimes the typical me time or the restfulness in a very lower level physical sense also does matter. So I think that's another thing that as monks we can be aware, and we can take our own personal initiatives, even sometimes I think in a monastic setup. But I think I really don't have to add much because Bhante Sudasu very beautifully put it. So these are my thoughts about the Dhammadaya Sutra.
Thank you, Venerable Ananda, for sharing your thoughts. And I think this is a very friendly discussion. And of course, by reading the sutra, this sutra, let's say 10, 12 of us, we could have a different way of understanding the sutra. So we're on the same page, but your perception, the way you look at this is also very important. I think we are open to discussing this to help one another, because for me personally, by doing this, by listening to everybody's perspectives, I learn a lot. My consciousness begins to expand after this. So thank you. Bhante Kusala, what are your thoughts on this sutta?
Thank you, Bhante. And when you say, we like to have a topic for the discussion this Monday, the very first one that came up, Dhammadaya, you picked it graciously, and I said, our own Bhante Sudasu has done a translation of it, and you said, let's use that exact one. And I was actually reading Dhammadaya Sutta this week because I was kind of compiling the journal of the Tudong, and I found Bhante Sudasu's translation very accurate when you compare it to the Pali. And it's wonderful to receive his own introduction for the sutta, for this discussion. And what reminded me when I read this sutta several times is Venerable Ananda's life as the attendant of the Buddha. He had 4 things he liked, and he had 4 things he disliked. And the Buddha asked, what 4 things do you like? The Venerable Ananda said, when I receive a meal invitation, you should go. That's one thing that I like. And when people come from different countries, different places to meet you, I should be able to bring them to you anytime. And if I have a doubt, I should be able to clarify it. And if there is a Dhamma talk given by you in any place without me, in my absence, please you will have to teach it to me when we meet again. So those 4 things. And then 4 things he disliked, he said, whatever the robes and material you receive, you should never give them to me. This is, him inheriting Dhamma, not material possessions. And then he said, the delicate food you receive, you should not give them to me. This is him being that monk who is praiseworthy. And then he said, the invitations you receive, I should not go to them. This is also him not being being the attendant of the Buddha for material and favors, to receive that same level of treatment like the Buddha. And I should not be staying in the same kuti like you do. I should not be staying in your Gandha kuti. This is also him rejecting all the good, I would say, the comfort maybe people gave to the Buddha. So we see, I think, through these requests made by Venerable Ananda in the very beginning, when he was picked by the Buddha, above all these monks who were willing to serve the Buddha, and then the Buddha picked his own, I think he's the cousin, right? Cousin he grew up with. So this is a monk who had such qualities, and I'm sure when we read different Sangha qualities from the past, we see we see Dhammadaya, the instructions living through the lives of these monks. And I also have a bad story, like Venerable Anand mentioned.
What's the bad story?
Not a bad story, it's a bag story, travel bag story actually.
Okay.
So one time I was flying from Germany, Düsseldorf, Germany to Milan. This was 10 years ago. And my bag broke at the security checkpoint. So they gave me a trash bag like thing to put all my belongings. And then I went to the gate and they said, no, you can't take this to the plane. Because they have the metal structure, you have to put your bag through it to prove that it is cabin worthy. So mine was obviously not cabin worthy. So I had to specially pay to get me through, and I was the last passenger for that flight, and I didn't want to lose it ahead of a snowstorm that day. So, and then at Milan, I went to to a bag store, and that, the best one available, I picked that, and I remember giving it away to my friends several years later when I went to Sri Lanka, but then I started missing it. So I was thinking of, what if I have it back? That's the best bag to have. And so I needed some things brought from Sri Lanka. And so I told my friend to send those things in that bag. And then I looked at it again. I was like, why did I even like this bag? So I just completely, I was not able to put, it was just Patari, Apo, Tejo, Vayu, the four elements. So I was really delightful in that moment that, oh, I'm able to let go of this. I can give it back to them. And I sent it back again when I had when they came to visit me in Boston, I gave it back to them. So these little experiences we have in life teach us, how we associate the material things in life. That's that thing. And so I'm also willing, I like to share an experience of our Tildong with this, especially as we were doing the meal reflections on after receiving food in our Tildong. It's definitely not the best food. So we were saying Patisankaya only so Pindapatam Patisevami before every meal, together as a group. And the meaning of that meal reflection is that definitely, this food is not for sport, not for showing off, not for ornament, not for adornment, only to maintain this body. And it was obvious from the food we received that this food is not for any adornment. It was just to carry on this body. So it's easier for us to understand Dhammadaya, the sutta, in those circumstances. And I do remember clearly on that day when Bhante Subdaso and two other nuns, bhikkhunis, went on alms round. I was waiting for them because I couldn't walk after a little injury. So Bhante Subdaso returned and he sat with his arms ball, and he opened the ball right in front of me and it was empty. And he was not showing any signs of disappointment at all. He was ready to go, like the monk who was praised by the Buddha for is willing to stay hungry. I don't know if my mind read is waiting for us by our host, our good friend there in Agrigento, who are from Germany at the time, who were there sightseeing and visiting that part of Sicily. They also gave some food. So we were not going to go without food, but that moment was pretty remarkable for us to practice. Okay, we never went any day without food, but I now wish that we did go a day without food, so that the way the Buddha praised that monk for willing to bear hunger and bear such feelings is amazing. And when you are able to tolerate that, I think you are able to tolerate so many other things later in your life as a monk. And that's the message that I thought is important, that we practice that way. Of course, this is not teaching us anything about self-mortification. It's not to torture your body. I think we should not misunderstand it that way. It's about practicing khanti, patience, being able to torture your body. I think we should not misunderstand it that way. It's about practicing khanti, patience, being able to practice that to the fullest as a perfection. And this definitely helps us to maintain our peace of mind, sanity, calmness, and equanimity, and still respond politely, respond peacefully without being agitated by that experience of hunger, because it's a temporary feeling and we are not going to die because of not eating on that day. So those are my first thoughts that I'd like to share. Thank you for the opportunity, Bhante.
No, thank you, Bhante Kusula. You actually have shared a lot of insights regarding this sutta. I think your own experience of Tudong together with Bhante Sudha, so it definitely shows the Dhammadaya, the inheritance of the Dhamma. The Dhamma essence you have inherited through the practice. I think it is not that easy to travel in a country where there are no Buddhist people. Let's say when you do Tudong practice in Buddhist countries like Thailand, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, then of course people know, people would like to offer something to the monks. Let's say if Thai monks go to Sri Lanka for Tudong practice, and Sri Lankan Buddhists know, they are used to giving Pindapata, even not just the Buddhists, those the Tamil people, Christian people, Muslim people living in Sri Lanka, they also line up to serve something. But in a country like Italy, it's a Christian majority country. They are not used to this kind of practice, and going there for Tudong practice with this understanding, by the way, then not receiving something might give you some kind of negative feeling. Oh my goodness, what am I doing here? And there's the possibility of going impatient and reacting. But that practice, I think, truly helped you to cultivate patience and also this simplicity. You had no idea where you were going to camp out in the night, which place, and just having the backpack, carrying that backpack. And of course, Bhante Kusala, you said that there were times you couldn't sleep, because your body was not used to it. I think even bearing up that experience, that was in line with the teachings we find in this sutta. Of course, definitely it helped you to cultivate not only patience, also the simplicity of life, which eventually I have seen, like when you return, I've seen how happy you were. But at the same time, I think I also saw you were missing the spicy food. Just like me, when I went to Corsica and Sardinia for Dhamma tour, and of course those people, they just eat bread and some other kind of things. But I think I was missing some typical the spicy food, rice, and etc. But then I was thinking, no, this is the right place to be, to practice Dhamma, to be contented with whatever I am given. I should not have expectations and be upset about it, not complaining. Otherwise people complain a lot, right? So this is an amazing story. Venerable Pesala from Sri Lanka, please feel free to share your insight with us.
My Vandana to Venerable, all the senior monks here, and actually very briefly explain our monks here about this valuable sutta. And Venerable Bhante, when I was reading this sutta, and initially I also had the same feeling, like the doubt. 2 months they are having the hunger, but the Buddha asking to throw the food away. Then even we had some discussions amongst our monks. And what is the reason? Then luckily I had the opportunity to read the contemporary on that, and there it was nicely explained that because this was happened after Buddha appeared and Buddha preaching the Dhamma. When the sanghas appeared, the first 61 arahants and other monks, bhikkhus appeared in the world. People get to know, and lots of material requisites and things flowing to the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha like rivers. It is mentioned. So when the lots of material requisites are there, even still the Buddha there, amongst monks, there was a struggle to share the material requisites. So the once in one location, Buddha had the noise of monks trying to share the the requisites amongst the senior monks and things. So at that time, Buddha thought, if I put rules, if I put any vinaya on the food, that would not be human. At that time, Buddha thought that it is not like the teacher, like the Buddha-like teacher, it is not suits to put vinaya rules on food. Then he to with utmost kindness, he decided to put this type of sutta. Then it is like mirror. Buddha said that in the commentaries, it is explained that it is like a mirror. When we are going to the mirror, then we can notice our mistakes and we can rectify them. Similarly, when I preach this kind of Dhammadaya Sutta, then monks consider, because as monks we need to have four requisites with we should know our limits and also the Dhamma. So then as monks, by contemplating on the values of the Dhamma, the purpose of the monk, as the Bhante we have discussed in the last sutta, we should know our purpose. The term you have used, retract. Always when you are getting mingled with the requisites and the lay people, our purpose time to time we getting forget. To avoid that, Buddha has preached this sutta, and that is the thing that I want to add Bhante to this sutta.
Yeah, thank you, Venerable Pesala, for sharing your insightful thoughts. And of course, you're right. Materialism is one thing, and the spirituality is another. Of course, as disciples of the Buddha, as monks and nuns, even anyone who is following the teachings of the Buddha, there is a purpose. The purpose is nirvana, as a nibbana. That is the freedom from the complete freedom from suffering. So if people, let's say we as monks, give priority to material things, and of course, eventually the material things are going to bite us. They are going to hurt us, and it happened to people. It happening to people now, including the monks. Even I had some kind of accumulation of a lot of material things in my room. And one day I had enough. I asked the monks, you come and take everything away from this room. So I emptied my room. Bhante Kusala is laughing because he knows that he also helped me. So now, every time, of course, lay people would like to offer you something. Now, when I receive gifts, I don't like to bring them inside my room, and I give it to the monks. Either you send them to Sri Lanka or for the other monks there or lay people there. And so it's such a huge relief, like you don't feel burdened. Otherwise, you feel like you're carrying a huge burden, and also mentally, emotionally, you feel, I don't know. Now I see that even I was going to get rid of the books, but I still am attached to the books because I need these books. Because when I write something, and then I need some references. So I want the books to be by my side. So I keep the books. But again, keeping them in order and neatly is also another burden. So sometimes, I'm very grateful that we have kindful monks who help me clean the room sometimes. So I think we monks should be, I think that's the main reason, I guess, the Buddha says, be mindful of your goal, why you have become a monk. As a lay Buddhist, what is your goal? It's a nirvana, enlightenment, freedom from suffering. Then you should know what brings suffering. Is of course attachment to material things obviously brings a lot of sufferings and pains. Now if we can practice let go, come on, with no ignorance, no judgment, please feel free to share your thoughts on this. Now we have Venerable Trudeau from Florida, USA, raised his hand. Venerable Trudeau, what are your thoughts?
Thank you for having me. Salutations to all of the venerables that is present here today. I apologize. The temperature here in Florida is dropping and will be dropping to 30 degrees soon this middle of this week. And my lips have been dry, so I put chapstick on. And I realized that the camera, I don't know what's going on, but maybe it's my camera. It looks like I'm wearing lipstick or something. So I don't want... I don't want people to think that I'm the, you know, like the fashion monk here, as we're talking about material things. I'd like to thank Venerable Sudaso for translating, as we young monks are looking up to him and all senior monks here as teachers of teachers. And it's very difficult translating this, and we're now, you know, discussing and over again to absorb the true meaning of the Dhamma. This particular teaching today came at a very important and salient time in our society and within my close students. I'm now leading a group of local students in their 20s, their first year college students here, who are now really absorbing the Dhamma and under direct supervision of monks. And it's part of my research conducting to see how the new generation Zoomers absorb, listen, and practice the Dhamma. And as we talk about material things, I gather a lot of information from these young students and how they eat, the preference of what they eat, what happens when there's no A1 sauce, what happened when there's no mattress to sleep on and they have to sleep on the ground with us. It is very similar practice that Bhante Kusala and the Tudong practice that you all have endeavored lately is the same principle that I'm conditioning my students to do here locally, that to slowly give up things, to slowly just give up all of the small preferences. Ajahn Chah spoke about that. It is the preferences in life that cause suffering. There's so many tiny preferences that we want in life. The temperature of this room, you know, I don't like that certain car. I want a Mazda instead of a Toyota. You know, so to observe this one student who doesn't have much preferences. And when we narrow down, have to be skillful at looking at the students and to meet them where they're at in life in order for them to get the most out of the practice of the Dhamma. The middle way of teaching to where they're at in life in order for them to get the most out of the practice of the Dhamma. The middle way of teaching to Gen Zoomers, because if we are too harsh on them and take away their mattress and take away their A1 sauce, and we take away too many things at the wrong time, we could really be chasing them away when we are trying to cultivate the new emerging leaders of America, the new emerging leaders in the world. It's to make them the best students the world has ever seen. And part of that is to apply the middle way. And towards the end of the Dhamma, we see the middle way being prescribed over and over again to look at very closely. So I really want those who are listening to review carefully and look at how much you can let go, and to be inspired by Bhante Kusala's journey and Venerable Sudaso's leadership in the Tudong arena, and put yourself in their shoes. And the more things we give up in life, the happier truly we become. As I wrap up some of my agendas here, I plan to actually exemplify not so much Tudong, but I really want to wander the city with just a couple of students. And I want them to see me walk barefoot in Florida with an alms bowl and see in one day how many people actually knows how to give in the alms bowl, how I will sleep in the middle underneath I-275 in Florida. I just want to exemplify that. And, you know, just less is more in Buddhism. Less is more. And the one thing I want to wrap up in my contributions for tonight is that as we reflect on the materialism in the world, we're now getting jetpacks. People can fly around in jetpacks, in drones. Those who are very technologically informed with CNN and everything that we see, you know, iPhones 15, 16s coming out. The world tries to pull you away from us. The world tries to pull all of you away from us monks, pull you away from the Dhamma, pull you away from the Buddha, pull you away from the Triple Gem. And Stephen got to listen to Mike, and Mike is another student in his 20 who was well accomplished. He said 2 house, a car, and 2 motorcycles, and now coming back to spirituality, which is knowing yourself. And the Dhamma helps you to know yourself. The Dhamma helps you on the spiritual path, growth, and development. And so when I speak to my groups of students, and I said, "You guys see Mike he's got everything. There's nothing that he doesn't got. But now you see that he's returning back to the one thing that will lead him to true inner peace, liberation, and freedom, which is the spiritual path that we all are teaching here and reminding you all every 2 weeks is to return back to yourself, because like Bhante Saranapala said, the more material things you have, you will be enslaved by them. Truly, you will be saddened when it no longer works and when it's no longer here. We can see that for myself, the TikTok thing blew up. I was probably perhaps the first month that received 1 million followers on TikTok, and now recently, the past 3 days, they're talking about banning it. Government officials cannot have it on their phone, and I think in the near foreseeable future here, TikTok might be just disappearing. So then I am no longer a celebrity TikTok monk. So one could ask, do I look like I'm attached to TikTok? So as things come, as they will go, impermanence, and everything that we practice, I also have to, internalize that for the sake of my own peace, for the sake of peace for all of us. So thank you for bringing up this very necessary Dhamma talk today and subject.
And actually, very much, it's so funny. Like last time, one of my friends from Ottawa called me. He said, "Bhante, do you know this monk, about Tridao?" I said, "Yes." Oh my goodness, you won't believe, Bhante, he has all million fans, followers on TikTok. You should talk to him how to increase your followers. I said, well, let's see.
I think it's not about, like Ajahn Chah did not have TikTok. Ajahn Mun did not have TikTok. It is the quality of their teachings and the fact that they actually practice in seclusion, and everything that the Dhamma was discussed today, they did. And people from the UK had to find them with no GPS, with no Google, and they will seek out Ajahn Mun, Ajahn Lee, Ajahn Chah, and they will sit with them. They didn't even speak English. Ajahn Chah was like sabai sabai, and they had to learn what sabai sabai meant.
Yeah, actually, those great masters did not have the social media. Even nowadays, we have prominent people, Buddhist monks and other people. They don't have a big number of followers, but their teachings are amazing, and the people are seeking their teachings. So again, Dhamma is not about increasing the fan numbers. But it's all about the essence of the Dhamma practice, how to live a happy and peaceful life. So I would be very happy to receive or welcome some questions from our audience. This is a kind reminder to our friends who are watching us on Facebook and YouTube Live. If you have any questions, please feel free to write, and I will take your questions. Now, I would like to, I know Bhante Kusala raised your hand, hold your thoughts. There is a question from YouTube, Janaki, who's saying, what is the motive behind why that monk did not accept the food offered by the Buddha himself? I find it so difficult to understand. hope the monastics could explain. Anyone can answer this question? Bhante Sudas, what do you think?
So let me look at this question again. Again, it's important not to get fixated on the surface level practicality here. So again, we're asking, so why did the monk reject the food, whereas the other monk took the food? Why did the Buddha say that the one who rejected the food was more praiseworthy? So again, it's not necessarily that there was defilements present in the mind of one monk or the other, but it's about, first off, it's about reflecting upon how things look from the outside. That's actually one of the major points that the Buddha makes here. He says that if we look like we're just trying to collect the wealth that tends to accumulate around high merit individuals like some Muslim Buddhas, then that's what other people will say about us. They'll say like, oh, these people, they just became monks so that they could get wealthy. They became monks so they could live a comfortable life. They became monks so they could have the best food and live in the best places. And so we don't want to be giving the impression that that's why people get into monastic life. Or people saying like, oh, well, they just became Buddhist because the Buddhist schools are better, or the Buddhist communities are better supported. I actually don't know of anywhere in the world where that's really true. It's usually the other way around. But again, we don't want to give the impression that we're following the Buddha out of a desire for comfort or material acquisition of any kind. So in the case of these two monks, again, the Buddha is recognizing that, again, there's nothing inherently wrong with taking the food, the leftover food, and eating it. And so the Buddha doesn't actually criticize the monk who chose to eat the food. Rather, what the Buddha does is praise the monk who is willing to endure the discomfort of hunger out of this deeper wisdom of recognizing how that creates a proper attitude, both within the Sangha and also within the perspective of the wider community. So I hope that answers this question, but again, maybe one of the other monks wants to give a more detailed answer as well.
And also this could be a question like this. Are you living to eat, or are you eating to live? Okay. Yes, what about Tridao?
Yeah. So a lot of Theravada Buddhism is very psychological and very analytical when it comes to the Dhamma, its little thing. And sometimes our eyes, depends on who the lay follower is. Originally I was like this when studying the Dhamma, with a magnifying glass and stuck on certain key words, and it just on that. The Buddha taught us to think simply and live simply. That's why the monastic order is here to kind of distill for you to understand in the most simplest way. And again, yeah, when it comes to the food, and I taught all my students this just most recently, as we eat to survive. Exactly what Bhante Saranapala said. And when we give when I gave the blessing to the food on the table, there were invitations for us, myself and my students, to eat. And when I put my hands together and I gave the intentions for the blessing of the food, I very clearly stated, and too bad this wasn't on live video like all my other rest of the live videos, but I said, thank you for the food that is being blessed here for our survival, to nourish our bodies, and that we use everything here on this table for the benefit of other people, are dedicating our body, speech, and mind with the calories that we're going to use for the benefit of humanity. And that's something that you should reflect on before eating, to slow down, to think about, nourishing one's body. And what are you going to do with the thoughts, with what you're about to say, and the actions you're going to take after eating that food? It is the intention, the volition behind it that will matter most for your karma. Thank you.
Thank you. Bante Kusala, you raised your hand. What are your thoughts? I know we have two more questions from the audience on YouTube, but I will ask later. Bante Kusala.
I was actually going to respond to that question, Bante, from also in Zoom. I see that question from our long time participant, Janaki Balasuri. The Buddha himself, I think Bante Sudaso also said this, but I'm going to put the sutta and quote the sutta here, because the Buddha himself answered this question. The Buddha said, why is that? Tanki sahetu. That's the Pali. Why is that? This question, that's your question. Buddha said, in Pali, for that monk, Vigaratta, for a long period of time, this refusing of food and staying hungry that day will help him to practice having few wishes, less wishes, like apichataya. That's very, his mind is very light because he is not expecting too many things in his life. And santuttitaya, for his contentment, he is happy with food and without food. He can do both. And that's amazing to have that kind of a mind. Sallekataya, so this is self-effacing. So you are Salleka here is this word is difficult to translate, but I will try. I would say this effacement is like you are able to stay calm in your state of being. That's the closest I can get for now. And Subharataya, this is, you are not a burden to anyone, whether you receive food from that family or this family or not, you are still able to teach Dhamma to them. You are not biased. You are easy to be supported. Imagine being a monk in your situation, and you are still happy. You didn't receive your meal that day, but you are still happy, and that's teaching how we really can practice. And this is how I see Adi Kalyana, PO in the beginning. You teach a sila, you teach a foundation that is very strong in you already. And that is speaking volumes about how this practice has helped you and how you live through that. You are not affected by not eating that day. And Virya Rambhaya, you have this ardent, you have this energetic, this gives you energy. The energy is not from food, but actually through your own inspiration and but Dao mentioned this, that your intention is to arouse more energy. And how does that happen? Now you are lacking food, you have not eaten, but you are still inspired. This is like, in simple terms, like you are so exhausted, and the moment you sit and do some meditation, even the power of hunger. Now the internet is talking about fasting. All the doctors are highlighting about fasting and how important that, when you stay fasting, your cancer cells get killed. Intermittent fasting is practiced by all the workout trainers. They highlight the importance of it. And this is, in a way, physically and mentally and spiritually, in every way, this is going to help you. And these several reasons that it helps you to have few wishes, to be content, self-effacing, unburdensome, and energetic. For these reasons, that monk was praised. It's not a temporary experience. It's like how I look at Theodong now. Theodong is going to live with me for the rest of my life. That's how I look at it. And Bhante Suddhasa is happy about it because he made me do it. And he and Ayasoma, they both really encouraged me to. We'd never met before. We only met in Italy and we did all these days together. And I was the one most expressive of my concerns, and he was able to tolerate all of that. I have deep respect for you and to Ayasoma for all of that, also to Aya Brahmavara. You see, I encourage all the monks to try it at least one time in their lives. It's going to teach you so much, and it will live with you for the rest of your life. And you will talk about it, and you will be inspired from it again and again. And you will see how sutras come to your life easily with this kind of practice.
I think that way we are inspired by this, and I'm thinking of same thing here in Canada, maybe from Toronto to Ottawa, to keep walking on Highway 401. Not only is a 4 hours drive, and I see we can camp out, and maybe if we need help, I will ask Bhante Sudasu to come over here, and we can do it together. And we can end up at the Ottawa Buddhist Temple where Bhante Jinananda lives. He is the head of that temple. So Bhante Jinananda, you raised your hand. What are your thoughts?
Yes, the thing I wanted to share with today's discussion is that the Buddha wanted us to embrace the Dharma in the subtle point of view, so that he wanted to test ourselves on different things time to time. The Buddha, appreciate the monk who doesn't take food. It means that actually we think about the need of food, not only material food and as well as other food items the Buddha explained in details. So we never forget the very important advice from the Buddha as we recited after every Dhamma discussion, Sabba Papa Sakarana. There the Buddha said, Mattanyutata Bhattasmi. That statement is added to the training of at the very beginning of the sasana, because that is one of the major things we all should remember. Because when we vow, promise ourselves to practice solitude for the sake of our own salvation, one thing we should be careful about is the consumption of not only material food but other ways of consumption. So the Buddha wanted us to be careful about this, because it is also a retinue of Mara. If you look at the Padana Sutta in Sutta Nipata, Buddha talks about the hunger and thirsty as a Mara. So if you eat it, it's fine, but at the same time, if you strive on to be away from even with hunger, that mental energy you take on that is so much, so that you can bear any pain, any suffering, because of the practice of being patient with the food. So in Mansaputtaka Sutta in Samyutta Nikaya, Buddha asks how to consider the food we eat, though they are delicious or not, so that Buddha has taught us different things about this, so that Buddha wanted to check us whether we have some desire on food, whether we have we haven't desire in food, something like that Buddha is testing here. So when we come to the later part of the discourse, Buddha say directly that if you are not going to be and have the Dhamma, you are going to have those kind of defilements, so that you should be careful of this kind of things. And I think that's what I wanted to share with the questions Mrs. Janaki Balusuri asked, and it is a kind of additions to what several monks mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante Jananda. And also remember, when Buddha was practicing severe asceticism, he continued practicing meditation, searching the way to enlightenment, not eating or drinking at all. And eventually he realized that kind of extreme practice is not profitable, not productive, not leading to vision and knowledge, what he was looking for, nirvana. So he had to abandon that practice. Then we also know he was offered milk rice, kira payasa, and after consuming kira payasa, milk rice offered by the lady Sujata, then he regained physical strength and also mental strength. Then I think that's why he came up with this middle way, right? Middle path. Even I think Bhante Jananda, you brought up that interesting point. The mattanyutaja bhattasmin, the moderation in eating food is very important. I think that's the key question. I think even somebody asked, I said, Bhavani deleted that question. How does mind and body function with little food or no food at all? So I think Buddha knew that. So we to function even for the monks. Let's say we are the village monks, urban monks, city monks. We have so much spiritual obligations. We have to do a lot of programs, walk here and there, without taking care of the body. Now, I don't think we can run all these programs. So we have to, what is really important is not giving the priority to the consumption of the food. You know how sometimes people just give the priority, even lay people, let's say, they just eat. Like there's a party starting at 6 o'clock, from 6 p.m. to midnight, even 1 a.m., 2 a.m., they just keep eating of 6 8 hours. That's how I see people become so unhealthy. So moderation in eating food is very important. So I think there must be a reason why Buddha praised that monk for refusing to eat, not accepting the food. Maybe it's as even Bhante Kusala highlighted that even if you can tolerate it, this patience, this endurance is going to be of immense benefit to the venerable monks and nuns. Like sometimes you could go a day without food, without receiving food from lay people, because our life is dependent on people. We did talk about this last time when we discussed the Abhinha Pachavekitapa Sutta or Dasadhamma Sutta. So there is Bhante Jananda, do you have more to share?
I just wanted to add something when you said moderation in eating.
Yeah.
It's not the amount of food you take. It doesn't mean that the little food you should eat. The moderation in eating is about the intention of eating. So in as I remember, it is in Mahasakludaya Sutta, if I'm not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Mahasakludaya admired the Buddha, quoting that the monks like the Buddha. There are 5 reasons that, according to him, there are 5 reasons that bhikkhus and bhikkhunis and lay followers like the Buddha, and one of these is that the Buddha eat little, and Buddha rejected it. He said that some days I have eaten a full patra of different type of delicious food. Sometimes I ate only a little thing. So that Buddha rejected that idea, because eating in moderation is not mean the amount of little food. It is the purpose of food. So yeah, again, finding food is a suffering, according to what we recited on everyday basis. Idan yahar gavin chiduka. Looking for food, whatever amount is a suffering. And Pante Kusal was explaining that during his long tudong in Italy. So finding food is a suffering, and so that we have to think about in such a way that in order for us to get out of any desire for not for food as well as other things we use for monastic life as well as lay people's life, if you want to speed up your journey into what Venerable Sariputta said at the end of the discourse.
Yeah, and also remember there are some type of questions. Eka nama king, what is one? Sabbe satta aharatrika. All human beings depend on food. So is that a contrast? I don't know. This is something to discuss. Now here Buddha is praising the monk who is refusing the food. Venerable Pesala, you raised your hand.
Yes, Bante, I want to add something on that. Bante, Sabbe Saptaharatika, as you said, it is not only the coarse food or the just gross food. In the mental condition called rapture, meaning preeti.
Yeah.
When you Buddha always asking us to focus on the path of the Dhamma. Then there we have even the Sila Samadhi and have the mental rapture. Rapture is kind of a food. When you, I mean, it is by saying that Buddha not asking not to eat, not to stay always without eating. It is not. He's not just asking. Sometimes time to time when we do alms giving rounds, sometimes some days we miss the alms. We are not getting any kind of alms. At that time, if we have the focus on the Dhamma, our mind is always have that rapture feeling. So that will make us the day perfect, even without the food. So one incident was happened, Bante, to me when I was doing the arms round, and I met inside one of the place. There was some dogs. They were staying without any food, and when I opened my bowl in front of them, the saliva comes out from their mouths. The innocent dogs. So then I had the hunger, but I just offer my arms to them for their hunger, because I knew that they haven't had the food for a longer period of time. But that time, my mind filled with rapture that I have donated some innocent animals. So in the beginning of that day, I didn't feel the hunger. And so similarly, the Buddha said, when we have the focus on the Dhamma, and even missing the 1 day, 2 days, it is not a big matter. Thereby you get the rapture. And Bhante, there is another incident. Buddha asked monks, you can stay with the lady alone, but don't mingle with the requisites, more than the requirement. Because, but don't mingle with the requisites, more than the requirement. Because, that's much of, even the enlightened beings getting disturbed by the, flowing of these requisites. Then when Ananda asking, whenever sir, how that happened, the enlightened beings, how can they disturb that? Then at that time Buddha explained, they are not reducing, I mean they are not away from their enlightenment, but still the Ditta Dhamma Sukha Viharane, mean they cannot the seclusion, finding the seclusion is difficult for even the enlightenment when we are dealing with the 4 requisites. So that's why we have to be very careful on the requisites. And and another sutta, another one of suttas, it is said that one of the previous monk, he was nicely preaching the Dhamma, and people get attached to him, and they said, Bante, stay in our village, we will offer you all requisites, food, everything we will offer. So you stay our village, and you will continue to teach us the Dhamma. Then what that monk has done? The following day, even without to inform anyone, he left the village. Because so that's what the more than depending on the requisite, though it is seems like for us it's happy, but you know it will definitely harm our way of Nibbana Bhakti. That's what I want to admit.
Yeah, and also I would like to bring your attention to this story Veranja Bhamana, right? Brahmin Veranja. He invited the Buddha together with his disciples for 3 months rain retreat. He promised that he would provide all the requisites, food, etc. But when we went home, he forgot. So they survived for 3 months with whatever they was available to eat something, right? So I think it's very important to understand. So Venerable Trudeau, you raised your hand. What
Yes.
is next talks?
Thank you. Usually when we don't have a lot of monastics, I tend to contribute a little bit more. And so I just want to bring some science into today's talk, particularly neuroscience. Have everyone noticed when you walk into Walmart and bread, you see in the days of the Buddha, bread was like, or in the days of Jesus, the bread was like a loaf of bread. So now when we go out and we go shopping, go grocery shopping, we go into the bread section. Have everyone noticed that there are layers of so many brands bread? You got the $2 brand, you have the Publix brand, and then you have Italian brand, and then you have all of the, and then you have buttered type. You have the sesame. You the science tells us that when your senses are activated, ayatanas, right? When all this is activated, when you step outside your house, you're constantly processing information. Your brain can only process at one time, like I think like 60 bits, and the whole world is just overloading you with all of this. Literally, a person who is quite attached to bread could actually go into the bread section and still go home and sleep and probably have nightmares over the choice that they have made. There are people who are like that. I mean, just the peanut butter and jelly alone. Look at how many brands there are. So awareness of the preferences and awareness of the options that you have. I think that brings back mindfulness when you step out of the house, what the world is ready to bombard you with. Venerable Siddhasa lives in New York, and when you go to New York, look at how many advertisements. When my students come back and every morning I ask them, hey, did you sleep good? And they're like, yeah, I got 8 hours of sleep. But then right after, they would tell me they're tired or they were still tired. They're tired, and you yourself, all the lay people, reflect. Why are you tired after getting a full night rest, according to sleep study and sleep science? That's because your mind has been processing all of these options, all of these preferences out in the world, that it seeps into your unconscious and subconscious. You wake up still thinking about the bread that you that you saw yesterday. So this is why in the middle and towards the end of the suttas talks about seclusion. And when we try to step back a little bit and we meditate and we close our eyes and we guard our senses, every time when your senses are open, you must guard them to ensure your own peace. And part of that peace is less bits of information intruding within you, inside you. So they're like these little details that you would want to pay attention to in regards to the minimization, the mitigation. Again, like I told you, all of these marketing and all of these options and choices pulls you away from our practice. And lastly, I wanted to talk about what Venerable Bhante Kusala said about the energy part. When you eat less and you suffer, what is the joy in suffering? What is the joy in the less part in your life? So I did a 1 year silent meditation, one complete year where I had maybe two or three types of contacts with family members throughout the entire year. I believe throughout the entire year, I spoke about 100 words the entire year. And as I was studying and practicing and meditating for that year, I came across one quote that was one of the most profound quote I have ever read that directly applies to all of us. And that was the the magnitude, the depth of your suffering can also be the height of your spiritual joy. And if you meditate on that just alone, you realize that people in their lowest bottom point in their life, which is typically people in jail or prison, they spend a lot of time, they suffer greatly within their own minds, but once they get out, they have so much insight about their life, and that they, you know, once you hit rock bottom, you can only go back up. And I wanted to yield this floor for Venerable Nanda that raised his hand, but thank you for having me again.
Thank you, Venerable Brito, for sharing more insights. And we have Bante Nanda from Long Island raised his hand. Bante Nanda, unmute yourself and please share your thoughts.
So as according to this discussion is great. So the among defined ones, the craving is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have five senses, chakku, sosa, dham, jiva, kaya. You can add mana also as sub-insight. So among them, the objects.
I'll give you 1 second, real quick.
These senses, for chakku and jiva, is generate more craving. Among them, the jiva is the rasa tanha. Rasa tanha. It's a big craving. So I think Buddha wanted to emphasize everybody to understand this. Also, the pratyeksa what we do, as one of the Bhantes mentioned previously earlier, in pratyeksa point is very, very important for us, not only for the monks, but also all lay people also. When we use something, maybe food, maybe clothing, maybe something else, there are three things to think about this. As Prayojanavasya, Dhatuvasya, particular. The reason why we use, and also Dhatuvasya, for elements, and also particular, the impurity, while we use it, what happens? Prayojanavasya, Dhatuvasya, particular. When we think, when we mindful on them, then what happens? Reduce tanha diktiman. When you think of the prayojana, so then you reduce tanha. Then when you do pratyek as dhatu, element, so that you reduce ditti. And when you do the pratyek as particular, the impurity of that, then you reduce the man, the conceit. So therefore, this is very good Dhamma point to understand, not only for the monks, but also all lay people. One, when they maintain their family life, when they maintain their household life, everybody is good to understand this point. Thank you very much.
And I say Bhante Nanda, actually, you brought up a very interesting point. How the Indriya, the sense faculties have a big role in creating cravings or desires, and especially like if you through the eyes, when you see the food, you feel like eating them. Then of course through the tongue you taste them, and then of course it creates a desire and craving. I say we did not look into that. I think this is a beautiful point that you have brought up. Thank you, Bhante Nanda. Okay. All right. So now we have come to the end of the discussion. Okay, where is Venerable Sumedha? Okay, I don't see him. So is there any Venerable who would like to recite the Patimokkha verses today, or do you want me to recite it? Okay, so I'm going to recite, okay? Sabba papassa akaranang kusalassa upasampada sacitta pariyodapanang tapotitekka nibbanang paramang vadanti buddha nahi pabbajito paropaghate samano hoti parang vihetayanto anupavado anupaghato patimokhe cha sangvaro mattanyuta cha bhattasmin pantancha sayanasanang adhichitte cha ayoga etang buddhana sasanang. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So today I'm very grateful to all our venerable monks who made a huge contribution by sharing the insights, wisdom, knowledge based on the Dhammadayata Sutta for the greater benefit of us, the monastics, as well as the lay people. This is such a great meritorious deed we have performed, and of course, Dhammanupassana, the meditation practice we did Dhammanusati, and we made our mind pure through the reflection of Dhamma. With a pure mind and heart, we would like to give blessings to the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, to all our venerable monks and the lay people for your long life, good health, happiness, peace of mind. And may Devas, celestial beings, continue to protect and guard you with the divine blessings for your health and safety. May all blessings be with you. And Sabbe Satta Bhavantu Sukhitatta. May all sentient beings be well, happy, and peaceful. So we are going to meet again next year. So today was the last discussion of year 2022. And next year it would be January 2nd. I hope all of you would be free. Normally January 1st, everybody is busy because the devotees come to the temple for blessings. I hope you would be free on January 2nd. It would be nice to have another productive Dhamma discussion beginning of the year to give inspiration, motivation to our people. So thank you, and I'm hoping to see you on January 2nd. Okay. Good night.
Sorry, I had to remain silent most of the time, and this iPad is so old that literally when I'm typing on it, it types like all sorts of weird letters and stuff. I wanted to address some of the questions that was asked on Instagram and TikTok. Let's see, this is one of those like very humongously old 12.9. I don't even know what generation this is. All I know is that I have two of them from people donating, and when I'm trying to respond, I hit one word and it types 5 words of the same word, the same letters. I don't understand. So I bought these keyboards. I haven't even gotten to set it up. They're wireless Bluetooth. This is so like distracting with all these technological issues. I wanted to address the question here by Saini, who wrote, and that's a good one too. If a person keep meditating throughout his life but can't reach that enlightenment stage, so is it possible to reach that stage after death? Because after death you don't have vial of Maya and 5 senses. Okay, so give me 1 second real quick. Let me return this Buddhist text. I think that it should be on every color shirts, even though the Buddhist colors would stand out more, but I want everyone to have an option to choose, because if they like it, they will wear it. We don't want them to be forced to wear orange or yellow all the time, or even red all the time. I want this to be fun and engaging, and that it spreads the message and word that we desperately need in humanity at this time. I couldn't express how beautiful you made this so simple and catchy at the same time. So I'm wrapping up my live session here and getting back soon. I don't even make sense half the time I'm texting. Okay, so back to Saini is that number one, if you don't meditate and wait for the last moment of death, it will be hard. It'll be one of the hardest thing ever. There are stories where of which at the moment of death, people were able to let go. You can achieve enlightenment if you're able to let go of greed, anger, and ignorance of the Four Noble Truths. But how do you let go of ignorance of the Four Noble Truths if you haven't meditated to see the true nature of reality and the impermanence, dukkha, and anatta, right? Impermanence, suffering, and the non-self. So therefore, that's why some of us monks dedicate our whole lives, like for the remaining balance of our life, to prepare us for death, so that we can let go of everything at the last breath. So you must create the causes and conditions so that it is conducive for you to let go and achieve nirvana and not come back and take rebirth. If you don't, or if you side with the lawyer in your head, and recently I've made the connection that Mara is the lawyer in your head that steers you away from what we're teaching you, steer you away from us, from the triple gem, from the teachings of the Buddha. So again, a smart person would not look, they would examine very carefully about their own psychological demon and how it drives them to want more and material possessions and pleasure and just want more of everything and so on. So look at the first noble truth again, and second noble truth. And so that would be my answer to you. So got some of these competing messages on my phones with more programs to come. At this time, due to the situation of TikTok, that it could be dismantled and deactivated due to legislation. Those of you who are inspired by my teachings and other teachings from Buddhist monastics, as evident here today, and because today was the biweekly, every 2 weeks we discuss with the monastic scholars. So please visit the Urban Buddhist Monk on YouTube, the Urban Buddhist Monk on YouTube, which is Venerable Saranapala, and you go into the panel, you see all these names like Venerable Sudaso, Venerable Kusala, Venerable Saranapala, and Venerable Pesala, and you type in their name and you research them and follow their teachings. Just because there's always cyber wars going on, and again, bring yourself back together for this practice and not to be too far. Again, 2 weeks ago, we spoke on a Dhamma talk about who are we becoming at the end of the day? Who are we becoming? So all of the practice here prepares you for that too, which is who are you becoming? Or have you become a more better, a kindful, grateful person, the good person, the good girl, the good guy? Or are we becoming more bitter, more resentful, more angry, and so on and so on? That was one of like the most profound reflection ever since I have been sitting on the Buddhist scholar panel, which is they bring up all sorts of great suttas that, quite frankly, sometimes even I have forgotten them. So it's a good reminder, kind of like a tap on the shoulder about all of our central to our practices of the threefold training. So again, yeah, that's some of my remarks. I need to get with my students over here on these phones here. And yes, I do one-on-one trainings and with people. I've been doing that for years now. So you can get with me on Instagram or yeah, Instagram Messenger is like the fastest way. I've also published my phone and YouTube and all of that good stuff. So it's very easy getting a hold of me directly to my cell phone. That's here. And yes, I do know Bante Varapano. He's pretty awesome. I've met him in person. He's been here teaching with me, I think a year ago, 2 years ago. So again, I'd like to conclude my session for tonight. And again, I look forward to seeing you all soon, and or speak or text to you via other media outlets. Okay, may you all be well, be happy, be free. Until the very next time.